A massive report just dropped from Shams Charania regarding Giannis Antetokounmpo that frankly has serious implications on the Phoenix Suns. Not just because the Suns have somehow been brought up in these Giannis sweepstakes, but most importantly, Suns have a ton of major questions to address out here in the offseason, specifically around Kevin Durant and how to reconstruct this roster to fit Matt Ishbia's vision of having more grit, more toughness, more intensity out there on the defensive end especially. And now this report regarding Giannis Antetokounmpo frankly has a serious effect in terms of what leverage the Suns have out there in trade negotiations over the course of this offseason. So we're going to break down what this report is saying, how it impacts the Phoenix Suns, and what we can now expect from the Suns heading into this offseason, because there is so much stuff to look at as we move closer and closer. Now, the draft lottery tonight, NBA draft free agency, and everything that's going on. So if you want to stay up to date with everything going on this before we dive into this report today, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Over 67% of our viewers haven't hit the subscribe button just yet, and we want to keep you up to date with everything that's going on with this Phoenix Suns team. But let's dive into it, because we've heard all the reports, we know all the discourse. Most Suns fans understand the implications that this offseason has on the future of this Phoenix Suns organization. I mean, Kevin Durant, you rarely get generational level superstars out there on your roster. I don't care how old KD is, him being a trade asset or a guy to build around. These are things that you have to factor into the twilight of KD's career, especially after a season where you couldn't even make the play-in tournament. And one of the big leveraging factors we've seen out there, especially in recent weeks, was, the signs were indicating that Giannis might want to stay with the Milwaukee Bucks, might want to stay with that organization, despite how dire and how messy that entire spot has been. And you look at other teams that Brian Gregory could look at, dealing with the Phoenix Suns, dealing with the Houston Rockets, right? A team that is in need of some offensive firepower. Kevin Durant becomes way more of a need when there's not a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo out there on the table, out there in the mix for these trade negotiations. So that kind of changes with this report that just dropped from Shams Charania, as essentially, while he said he has not made any firm decisions, so two-time NBA champion has not made any firm decisions, but for the first time in his career, he's open-minded about whether his best fit is remaining in Milwaukee or playing elsewhere. So he had a full, basically, deep dive into this, and again, reciting similar stuff. MVP has not made any firm decisions after his the franchise's third consecutive postseason exit in the first round, but for the first time in his career, Antetokounmpo is exploring whether his best long-term fit is remaining in Milwaukee or playing elsewhere. So to dive deeper in terms of what's going on, many teams have approached the Bucks frequently over the years about the availability of Antetokounmpo as a normal exercise, and they're expected to ramp up their due diligence during the combine, according to league sources. But any conversation surrounding the perennial All-NBA superstar and 2021 NBA champion starts primarily where he believes his long-term future lies and whether there's a franchise outside of Milwaukee that makes sense for him. So basically, there's a lot of stuff going on here with these Giannis updates, with these Giannis deep dives. And to make things crazier, because I'll bring this up first, because I know a lot of people, when they see Giannis Antetokounmpo demanding a trade and how the Suns have been so star hungry in recent seasons, heck, even this season, going after Jimmy Butler, of course, going after Bradley Beal, getting Kevin Durant, bringing in all these big-name players, and you see Giannis demand a trade, or not demand a trade, but looking like he's going to mutually part ways with the Milwaukee Bucks, and say, hey, the Suns can get in on that. And frankly, the odds books gave the Suns a lot higher odds than I would have projected to land Giannis Antetokounmpo. Again, the actual odds itself aren't that high, but the Suns are up there, right, with these teams that have stockpiles of assets. The Oklahoma City Thunder, the Brooklyn Nets, right? The Houston Rockets don't even have that crazy. They do have a significant sort of odds gap there, the Warriors. But, the Suns are right up there at the top of the list in terms of landing spots, destinations of a Giannis Antetokounmpo, which I found fairly interesting. And I'll touch on this, even though I don't think it's super realistic. Giannis ends up a Phoenix Sun. The avenue where this happens, and the piece of this, if we look at the article that was broken down in terms of, his future is, his long-term future lies in whether there's a franchise outside of Milwaukee that is sensible for him. We've seen a bunch of star players demand trades to the Phoenix Suns as of late. Like, Jimmy Butler wanted to be a Phoenix Sun. He wanted to be in this organization. He wanted to be on this team, and almost got his way there if it wasn't for Bradley Beal's no trade clause. Kevin Durant said he wants to be a Phoenix Sun. He wants to be on this team, and was willing to go there. When Bradley Beal was a coveted asset, relatively coveted asset, he said, "I'm only waiving my no trade clause to the Phoenix Suns." We've seen star players be like, "Hey, Phoenix is a place I want to go. I want to be. I want to be on that squad." So maybe there's an avenue where Giannis is like, "I want to be there," and then you find a way despite the lack of draft capital. I mean, it would be a weird sort of. The only reasonable trade package I could see going down that the Bucks would accept is if Devin Booker's involved. Of course, the Phoenix Suns don't want to trade Devin Booker. Now, some people I could see in our comments that be like, "Oh, you trade D-Book if you're going to get Giannis," and I'm not going to foster those discussions here right now until we have more definitive information on what of these hypotheticals actually happening. But for whatever reason, the Suns, for those reasons, I guess, the Suns are one of the teams among the favorites to land Giannis if he's not with the Milwaukee Bucks next season. So those are things to factor in. Those are things to discuss. But really where this has some serious implications on, this whole stuff going down is you look at the couple teams that are up there at the top. The Golden State Warriors were a team that were heavily after Kevin Durant at this year's trade deadline. A deal nearly went through. KD wasn't super interested in going there in the offseason or in the midway through this year. But in a podcast with Draymond Green, he didn't completely shut down the prospect of going back to Golden State out there in the future. So, they're a team that could be a KD suitor. If they get Giannis, they're completely off the table. Of course, the team that I expect Kevin Durant to get traded to, I expect him to be, made multiple videos on it, the Houston Rockets. They have a ton of assets. They have one of the teams, them and the Spurs, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Nets, have a bunch of draft capital, have a bunch of pieces that frankly make them, proper suitors, legitimate suitors to land Giannis Antetokounmpo. And that is, again, Giannis is just a better trade asset than KD. As much as we want to be homers and stuff, Giannis is averaging 30 points per game, 12 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 1.2 blocks, shooting 60% from the field, and is 30 years old. Like, Giannis is a two-time MVP, an NBA champion, and, in the prime of his career. KD still putting up remarkable stats. The stats aren't at the level of Giannis Antetokounmpo there right now. That's just the reality of it. He doesn't play the same level of defense. Yes, he's a better shooter, but he's 7 years older now at this point. Like, KD is not going to warrant the same trade package, not going to warrant the same trade interest, and clearly moves to the second tradable piece out there this offseason once Giannis Antetokounmpo is out there on the market. And then, the Suns have, rather than having all that leverage, having all that stuff, hey, we have the, the golden prize, the golden goose out there this offseason. You no longer have that when Giannis is out there available on these trade markets and teams willing to give more. Now, you could spin this in a different way. Like, you look at all the teams that are in the mix for Giannis, right? They convince themselves of, if we get Giannis, if we get a star player, we're good. And they build it up. They hype up the fan base. And then, the Rockets are hyping everyone up. And then the Thunder make a trade for Giannis. Then there might be an arms race out there in the Western Conference. Oh, okay, we got to load up and get Kevin Durant. Or the Spurs are in that position. And Warriors, whatever the team, right? That is stuff that could get factored, it could get planned. But in the short term, in the coming weeks, I think that Kevin Durant, the mobility on one of these trades actually happening, gets put on the back burner until it's locked in, it's figured out whether Giannis is traded or whether he is going to stay on the Milwaukee Bucks. So we'll see how all this shakes out. It could be a positive. It could be a negative for the Phoenix Suns. I don't think it's super realistic he ends up in a Phoenix Suns jersey, but you never know with how crazy the NBA has been as of late. But you have to figure out something to do with Bradley Beal at that point. But let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section down below. You guys the best thing as far as subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.